My fellow Canadians, you should be pissed off, because I know I am. We get charged fees left, right, and center by the big banks, yet they get caught breaking the law and all they get is a little slap on the wrist. In this video, I'm going to explain how their law breaking has significantly contributed to the housing crisis in Canada. So you may have heard about this in the US. TD Bank just paid a fine in excess of $3 billion, and it was for failing to stop money laundering by criminal organizations. Here in Canada, the biggest fine that's ever been given to a bank is $9.2 million, also to TD very recently, and that fine was for non-compliance with anti-money laundering regulations, such as failing to report suspicious transactions properly. I'm Justin from Tater, and in this video, I'm taking a departure from the usual investing videos, and I'm going to talk about how we can help level the playing field between us, regular, law-abiding, tax-paying Canadian citizens, and the big banks. This topic is important, and we can't let it be just swept under the rug with the usual news cycle. Okay, so first up, I'm going to cover what has actually transpired in Canada around money laundering, its effect on us, especially when it comes to housing prices. Next, I'm going to talk about what we can do about this as Canadians. And then finally, I'm going to show you a pretty cool way how you can bypass the big banks and their fees and invest in the exact same portfolios they offer. Over the long term, those fees can easily amount to six figures, so you're going to want to stick around for that as well. So let's get started. So this big fine that was in excess of $3 billion against TD Bank in the US, it was brought by the Department of Justice. Why? Because TD failed to stop money laundering activities tied to drug cartels and organized crime. They ended up pleading guilty to multiple charges, including conspiracy to violate the Bank Secrecy Act and commit money laundering. U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland said TD created an environment, quote, that allowed financial crime to flourish. Okay, so let's look at Canada. The largest fine ever issued to a Canadian bank was the $9.2 million I mentioned earlier. And that was also levied against TD Bank, a bank that manages billions and billions of assets every year. So $9.2 million is like pennies to them. FINTRAC is Canada's financial intelligence agency, and they are responsible for enforcing anti-money laundering and anti-terrorist financing regulations. FINTRAC has the authority to fine financial institutions up to $500,000 per day for non-compliance. But here's the problem. Canada hasn't updated its fine structure since 2008, and even then, $500,000 a day sounds like a lot to us, but to the banks, it's clearly nothing to worry about because they continue breaking these laws. I don't have to explain to you how inflation has driven up the cost of just about everything since 2008, but I do want to mention just a few figures. Prices have gone up 50 to 60% just for groceries. For housing, it's more than doubled since that time. Across the country, so nationwide, housing prices are up over 235% since 2008. Yet here we are in 2024, and the penalties that banks pay for breaking the law haven't kept up with inflation. But those same crimes, turning a blind eye to money laundering, or at least not paying enough attention to it, has increased housing prices for all of us. Now, TD is not the only bank guilty of such violations. FINTRAC imposed a $7.5 million fine against RBC in 2023 for failing to report suspicious transactions. And I need to bring up that $3+ billion fine again, because it seems painfully obvious that Canada's financial penalties are woefully inadequate. Why the huge difference in fines between the US and Canada? While Canada's lax money laundering laws are well known globally, and many criminal organizations see Canada as an easy target. The US, on the other hand, is much tougher on these kind of financial crimes. FINTRAC's max fine of $500,000 per day sounds significant, but the truth is it's rarely used to its full potential, and clearly it isn't enough to make the big banks break a sweat. If FINTRAC wants to keep up with the times and our neighbors to the south, it needs to start imposing penalties that reflect the real costs of these violations in today's economic landscape. Okay, we're getting into the meat of it now, but make sure you stick around for the end because I am going to talk about what we can do as Canadians about these systematic deficiencies in our country. So why is Canada so lenient when it comes to punishing banks? Well, the answer is almost certainly partially tied to how important these banks are to the Canadian economy. Banks like TD, RBC, and Scotiabank account for a significant chunk of Canada's GDP. If we have a look at the top 10 companies in Canada weighted by market capitalization, you can see that Royal Bank and TD are number 1 and 2 respectively, taking up over 11% of the Toronto Stock Exchange. Rounding out the top 10 is Bank of Montreal, meaning we have 3 banks just in the top 10.
If we have a look at sector exposure, we can see that financials absolutely dominate, taking up almost 31%, so close to 1/3 of the Toronto Stock Exchange. So how do these banks make so much money? Well, let's talk about some of the ways that they do it.
They charge you for holding your money, then they lend it out at high interest rates, and they push high-fee products like mutual funds that charge upwards of 2.5% of your life savings per year. And don't even get me started on their mortgage lending and investment advising conflicts of interest. Banks regularly encourage Canadians to pull additional equity out of their homes, increasing their mortgage, and then invest that money back with them. This way, the banks are double dipping. They're earning interest on the bigger mortgage while also collecting fees on the investments. Is this in the best interest of us, their clients?
The answer to that question is clearly no, but then another question pops into my mind. Why don't banks have to act in the best interest of their clients? Well, to best answer that, let's look at one really quick definition. In the context of investment and financial advice, a fiduciary is a person or organization legally and ethically bound to act in the best interest of their clients. Fiduciaries are obligated to prioritize the client's needs over their own financial gain or personal interests. So, extremely important information that every Canadian should know. Banks are typically not fiduciaries, which means they are not bound to act in the best interest of their clients, and they're not obligated to prioritize our needs over their own financial gain or personal interests. This is clearly not in the best interest of us Canadian citizens.
And yet our government is hesitant to push back on these financial giants, partially because they're such a big part of our economy. There are definitely other reasons they are hesitant to push back, and I'm going to get into those momentarily. You're going to want to stick around for that. Internationally, Canada has gained a reputation as an easy place to launder money, especially through real estate. Criminals love to use our financial system because it is less strict than other countries. One term these criminals like to use is snow washing. It's because Canada is seen as a place where dirty money gets cleaned like snow. Okay, so let's talk about how all of this affects the housing market. For years and years, cities like Vancouver and Toronto have been experiencing skyrocketing housing prices, and one contributing factor is money laundering. Criminals have been funneling billions of dollars into Canadian real estate as a way to hide their dirty money, using our housing market as a giant piggy bank. The result? Artificially inflated housing prices. The Cullen Commission was launched in 2019 by the BC government in response to mounting concerns about widespread money laundering. It came after several investigations revealed that criminals were using BC's real estate, casinos, and luxury markets to funnel huge sums of illicit money into the economy. This had far-reaching effects on the housing market, driving up prices and contributing to the province's affordability crisis. In 2022, the Commission estimated that money laundering increased housing prices by between, and I'm not making this up, 3.7 to 7.5%. To put things into perspective, let's average out that figure and say 5.6%. For someone trying to buy a house in Vancouver today, where the average cost is $1.3 million, that 5.6% increase adds an extra $72,800 to the price of the home, just due to the impact of money laundering. This is an unacceptable burden that hardworking, tax-paying, law-abiding Canadians have to bear. In the GTA, concerns about money laundering are just as significant. It's estimated that more than $28 billion worth of properties in the GTA have been bought through corporate entities, many of which do not disclose the true owner. This lack of transparency allows illicit funds to enter the market, pushing prices up, often through bidding wars where the property's value becomes irrelevant to criminals.
Because they are primarily looking to launder their money, so they don't care as much as law-abiding citizens how much they are spending. For criminals, it's not as much about the value of the property. It's more about securing a way to launder their dirty money.
When they enter a bidding war, they have no hesitation in outbidding legitimate buyers, which obviously drives prices higher. This behavior causes home prices to rise beyond what hardworking, honest Canadians should have to pay. The inflated prices in markets like BC and Toronto have a ripple effect, driving up prices across the country. As these cities become more unaffordable, buyers are forced to look at surrounding areas or even other provinces, increasing demand and pushing up prices in places once known as affordable regions. This knock-on effect puts pressure on housing markets nationwide. And the widespread issue doesn't just affect buyers, it affects renters as well. As home prices rise, rents increase too, making it harder for Canadians to find affordable housing. If you are angry about this, like I am, let me know in the comments and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on our next video. Let's talk about fees and dive a little deeper into what's going on behind the scenes. So banks and mutual fund providers in Canada spend a lot of money on lobbying the government to protect their profits. One of the reasons they've been able to keep hidden fees like deferred sales charges or DSCs around for so long is because they actively push against regulations that would force more transparency. This lobbying has worked for years, allowing these companies to quietly drain Canadian savings with fees that many investors don't even realize they're paying. In the US, mutual fund fees are significantly lower than what we pay here in Canada. For example, the average MER or management expense ratio for US mutual funds is about 0.5%, while in Canada, it's 4 times that amount.
Now let's talk about these deferred sales charges or DSCs. They're a type of fee that investors were forced to pay if they wanted to sell or redeem their mutual fund shares before a certain period, usually around 6 or 7 years. So imagine being locked into an investment that charges you high fees to manage your money, and by the way, do worse on average than simple index funds. And if you want to pull your money out early, you get hit with an extra charge. In the US, they had enough common sense to ban DSCs in the early 2000s, whereas Canada was much slower and did not ban them until June of 2022.
These kind of hidden costs are just one more way that banks have been siphoning off our hard-earned money without us even realizing it. And while DSCs are now banned, there are still other fees and practices that many investors need to be aware of. I'll be covering these topics on some upcoming videos, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out. Let's talk about some solutions. The Tater system was a way that you can take your money back from the big banks. I touched on it earlier. It's a simple method I've come up with to give you the same portfolios offered by the big banks, but save you on all the fees. That's coming up, so stay tuned. In the meantime, one effective way to combat the money laundering issue is through transparency reforms, such as the implementation of beneficial ownership registries. These registries would require property owners to disclose their true identities, making it harder for criminals to hide behind shell companies and launder money through real estate. The enforcement of these reforms, however, has been inconsistent across provinces. In Canada, real estate regulation falls largely under provincial jurisdiction, meaning that the decision to implement beneficial ownership registries is largely up to individual provinces. BC has taken the lead, introducing a beneficial ownership registry, requiring property owners to disclose their identities and increasing transparency in the market. This is a major step to curbing money laundering and its impact on housing prices. However, other provinces, like Ontario, have been slower to act. While Ontario recognizes the problem of money laundering through real estate, great, congratulations, Ontario, you recognize it. It has yet to implement any kind of a registry. It has nothing similar to what BC has. So this delay has left the market vulnerable, and calls for such registries across the provinces have grown, obviously. Still, the decision remains with individual provincial governments. At the federal level, there has been an increasing pressure for a national beneficial ownership registry that would not only cover real estate, but also extend to corporations and trusts. This would make it much harder for criminals to launder money through opaque ownership structures across the country, and it would provide consistency in enforcement. So how can we do this? We can write our local MPs. We can reach out to our member of parliament. We can demand action on transparency and regulation. We can urge them to support beneficial ownership registries and stronger anti-money laundering laws. MPs rely on constituent input to prioritize issues, so our voice can help protect our fellow Canadians from rising housing prices. If you have other ideas about how we can help create positive change, share in the comments. Let's talk about it. Okay, I've teased this enough. The Tater system, how you can take your money back from the big banks, the big institutions, put it back in your pocket, and still get the identical portfolios that they would otherwise charge you the fees for. Let's get into it. Really quick, just want to show the amount of money investors could save simply by using our program and eliminating the fees charged by robo-advisors. It is really remarkable. As you can see across the top, this is the initial investment amount, and then along the side, the investment horizon is the number of years invested. So over 20 and 30 years, you can see the amount of money investors could save simply by eliminating the fees charged by one of the leading robo-advisors. So as you can see here, even if you only have $50,000 to start, after 30 years, you could expect a portfolio improvement of over $126,000 just by eliminating these fees. Let's hop over to our Tater Portfolio Manager, and we will really quickly show you how to easily build and manage one of these portfolios to save on all of the fees. And we will open up the RBC Growth Portfolio. But as you can see, we've loaded in all of these portfolios from Wealthsimple, Modern Advisor, Questrade, CI Direct, and RBC. So you can build any of these portfolios on your own using our spreadsheet here. We'll click on the tab here to open up the RBC Growth Portfolio, and all you have to do is enter the initial amount you have to invest. So let's say 50,000. And then you simply purchase the number of shares shown in the shares to buy column. And when you do that, you fill in the table below after you purchase the shares from your brokerage, which we are happy to help with as well. And then you can see the remaining uninvested cash is just over the 2% called out for in this portfolio. In the future, when you have additional cash to invest, you would enter it into this cell. For this example, let's say we have $5,000. We'll just enter that, and then the far right column will show you the number of shares you need to buy in this situation. And then this column also shows you the number of shares to buy or sell to bring your portfolio back into balance in the future when share prices fluctuate. And as mentioned before, investors really only need to rebalance one time per year, so very little time is involved in managing these portfolios, and this time is very valuable. It can be worth thousands of dollars per hour just based on the long-term savings. Our Tater Portfolio Manager spreadsheet is free for a limited time for our YouTube subscribers, so let us know if you are interested. We also provide instructional videos and help along the way via email. Before you do anything else, make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss out on the next video. So by taking the steps I outlined in this one, we can push back against the forces that are driving up housing prices and draining Canadian savings. The system may seem like it's really stacked up against us right now, but with collective action, we can start to turn the tide. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.